Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Miss Texas Show. We are super excited to bring you another episode with another wonderful host, a wonderful guest. Actually, I'm here as your co-host, but we're definitely excited to be able to do that. So let me formally welcome everyone to the Miss Texas Show, where we showcase life in Texas and beyond and highlight amazing survivors of traumatic events, family violence, sex trafficking, sexual abuse, and community leaders to share community resources. Under our segment, Military Time, we invite military and veterans who would like to share with us their experiences during and after their military service. We run this segment in partnership with the National Veterans Chamber of Commerce. We would like to invite those who have overcome traumatic events and would like to share and are now ready to help others. Under our Beauty for Ashes segment, we invite fellow pageant sisters, winners, nominees, artists, musicians, actors, models, and dancers, as well as survivors who are now ambassadors for the cause, to share with us and our audience their lives and the impact they have made. Our show runs twice a month, so if you would like to become a guest on our show, please email us at msusatexas@gmail.com, which is MSUSATEXAS@gmail.com, or you can message us on our Facebook, which is also at Ms. USA Texas, and you may make a donation for our nonprofit organization, which is hopepyxglobal.org, to help us help more people. So with that being said, we have a wonderful guest with us today, MaryAnn. We want to be able to tell you a little bit about MaryAnn before she introduces herself. She was once a registered nurse with a happy family, but she soon found herself bending on back-to-back accusations of child abuse. And it caused her to then lose some of her children to a biased family court system, which eventually led to parental alienation. She became a pro se litigant, appealing to the Superior Court, with the victory proved life-saving. In addition to that, while struggling under the oppression of the family court, MaryAnn was guiding others through similar adversity. She found that times of desperation can lead to joyfulness. So during these moments, all she knew was to stay busy. So dealing with anxiety and depression, she found herself confronting fears and anxiousness through writing poetry and riding horses. Her first book, Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, contains many of the poems that she wrote while going through this adversity. They have proven to be so valuable to those reading her book for wisdom and guidance that she was asked to publish a collection of her poetry, which is Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. In order to help others further, MaryAnn also started a podcast titled Slam the Gavel, love that, where guests share their experiences, wisdom, and expertise in navigating the corruption of our court system. It is available on most podcast platforms, which includes Apple, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. So with that being said, MaryAnn, it is truly a pleasure and honor to have you here with us today. And so we really want to just start off with this. Please just introduce yourself to us. Let us know a little bit about you, your journey, what got you here today, anything you want to share.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your show. My name, as you said, MaryAnn Petri, and I've just been through this family court system like a lot of parents have been, and have been treated very badly. And, you know, some parents just don't know what to do. And that's why I wrote the book. It's a very short book. It's 160 pages long, and it's basically a manual to get parents through family court. And it offers advice in the back towards the end of psychologists and what they recommend and how this all happens, how parental alienation evolves from this big mess called family court.
Absolutely. Could you tell us a little bit about like what was life like prior to all of that taking place, and then a little bit about like what life is like now, like prior to all of that occurring.
Oh my goodness. Well, before all of this, we had divorced amicably, and that went on for a couple years. Everything was pretty much amicable. He helped me put a kitchen in and an upstairs bathroom in, and we got along until I had the great idea to introduce him to this distant acquaintance. I, however, did not know she worked in the courthouse. Once I introduced them, she moved in with him 2 weeks later, and 7 months later, they were married. And that's really not good for kids to have things move that fast, in my opinion. But in that time, afterwards, she had stated, I know a lot of people in the courthouse and I'm friends with all the judges. And then she went on to say that she knew all the state police troopers in the state police barracks up the road. And, now that you look back, it's intimidation tactics. And, the reason why I left this marriage was there was coercive control and, in terms, vague domestic violence. But then, once this woman came and inserted herself, it's almost like you start reliving that period of time again. And it was, it evolved into family court. And it was very rigged. And I think a lot of parents, they go in there thinking this is going to be fair. Judges are fair. They're going to have a fair outcome because the judge is going to see that, what's being done is wrong. And in fact, these judges are just shuttling you through like lambs to the slaughter. People don't realize this. And I started off with two attorneys. I went through about 3 attorneys, but then I had stuck out with the other 2, whatever. But I eventually had to let them go because I was running out of money. You can only rack up $45,000 and then wake up and realize that you've got to handle this yourself. And so much injustice was done by the judge, the family judge. Just really what they do is essentially the plan for any parent is they've got to make one parent a non-custodial parent. That way they can extract monies for child support. Now, that parent may be the fit, loving parent that wants to protect her child without coming out. I never came out and said I had to protect my kids. It was his attorney that called out parental alienation. And I just looked over like, why is he saying that? That wasn't even happening. None of this stuff, the false narrative that they played out through false allegations of emotional child abuse, which involves CPS, brought down my destruction, not only with my children, but my career as a nurse of almost 23 years. So essentially what CPS did was they came into my house, set my kitchen on fire, and then left like everything was fine. And I had to fight those indications. I was exonerated. 4 days later, I was hit with another indication on the second child and had to go through all of that again, which is another hearing in front of a CPS judge. And you're paying a lawyer practically a whole day from 9 a.m. to 3:30, 4 p.m. And luckily I was exonerated. He could see through what was going on. It's just too bad the family court didn't see what was going on. Even though I was exonerated, the family court judge proceeded with the false narrative that I was emotionally abusing these kids in order to get child support out of me. And what happens is in the state of Pennsylvania, or any state, I think, if you're indicated under any type of child abuse indications, you cannot work with children. So that ended my career as a nurse. And the clincher was that the hospital was saying everyone had to have their child abuse clearances in by November 23rd. And that's all well and good, but my hearing for the CPS judge wasn't December 4th. So once I lost my job, they were not going to rehire me because they knew I had other kids. And they know that parents constantly call false allegations on each other multiple times.
Wow. Yep.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh no, and because that's exactly the reaction I had was just that wow, and thank you so much for even sharing with us some of that. I definitely hear just so much that was unnecessary, just added trauma to the situation, unfortunately, and it was just a lot of extra steps that unfortunately you had to go through in those cases, and there was a lot that was affected. But there was also, so because you shared such incredible details and all of that, I wanted to also take a step back and make sure that background wise, how long was it, by the way, that you were married prior to this taking place and all of that, and then
Okay.
Because I heard you said that, a lot of it like went really quickly after you, but I'm curious like how long, were you married and all of those things?
Oh, I was married to him for 10 years. Um, and there were red flags. People don't realize when you're young and you haven't studied deep psychology of borderline personality disorders, um, bipolar, and narcissistic personality disorders. People need to study these because had I known this, I wouldn't have married him. And or I probably would have married him and divorced him 15 months later because that's when things really got kind of rocky. You'd have highs and then you'd have lows. Things would be fine for a couple months and then they would be really rocky. I was not allowed to spend any of my money. If I bought something, I had to hide it in the car. And I'm a thrifty shopper. I go to the thrifty shoppers. I go to I'll go to Macy's and I'll go to the on sale rack. Okay, those are the racks I hit first. So I'm very frugal, but he did not appreciate that either. And so that is a form of domestic violence, which is financial control. And I never knew that. I just recently learned that. But, when we separated, we drew up our own contract. He stated he did not want to go into court. And it's like, well, I don't want to go in there either. I don't care. Let's just figure something out. And his attorney drew up a marriage settlement and, I signed it. Sound good to me. And we figured on, because I was a new nurse at this hospital starting out, only making $22 an hour. So I told him, I said, I'm scared. I've never really owned my own house. And he knew that. And he said, well, how about if you take on, if I paid you X amount of dollars, which was $600 a month in child support. And I said, yeah, that's fine because I am making decent money, but I can't, I'm just scared. And he knew that. So that went on for 5 years that he paid that. And then in the interim, I had introduced him stupidly to this woman. And so that's when everything went very quickly down the drain. And in that interim, it was in 2008, things weren't going so well at the hospital. They were calling off nurses for some reason. I don't know why this was happening, but it was like, oh no. So I did ask him, could I have a raise in the child support? Not much. I just asked him, could I have like 800? I wasn't asking for 1,500. I was just asking for 800. So he went to a lawyer and he only gave me an extra $125. I said, well, that's fine. Okay, I'll deal with that. That's fine. So just carried on my married way until he decided to go to a lawyer and just stop the child support. And I should have gone to that support conference, but my attorney said, what are you going to do? Babysit me while I do my job? And you know what? I should have babysat him while he did his job because he let the child support end. And then he says to me, well, he seems like a nice guy to me. It's like, no, there's a reason why I divorced him. He's not a nice guy. He just lied to you. So then that's when you have to go into court in front of a judge and ask for child support. The judge granted $300 a month for 3 children while he worked as a vice president of a company. And this is, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just reacting and saying, wow. But you continue.
And there is a pattern that when people ask for more child support or help with child support, that's when the other party goes in to take the children away from you. And I always tell people, don't rock the boat. I'm not an attorney, but my advice to you is just get by with what you got and just get those kids up to the 18 years of age and you're done. Because once you ask for child support, that's when they come after you to take your kids away and they will use anything they can. The silver bullet of calling someone mentally ill, which was also used by the CPS caseworker with a degree in child development. And, I just couldn't believe a caseworker can come into your house and just start screaming at you. And my parents were there, and they had taken the one child to the park. And so I could be interviewed. Luckily, my husband was laid off, my current husband. And he's sitting there looking at her scream at me. And we were just dumbfounded because, like, how do we get her out of the house? I should have just said, enough. I'm calling my attorney, leave. And that's the best advice I could give anyone, and or tape them and say, just to let you know, I'm taping you. We're going to have this conversation. It's going to be taped, just so you know that. Her behavior was appalling. And in her report, it was all one-sided. It was just a one-sided report. She got away with it. She even admitted in transcript that she got all the information from the ex-husband. Now, bear in mind, when she came to my house, my parents were there. She could have taken them into the dining room and said, how's the relationship with her and her children? I mean, she could have done a thorough interview. She chose not to. So where we're at now, I had to pay. They turned the tables on me by taking the kids away. And when the judge did that, there was a lot of laughing, clapping, and cheering in the courtroom by the opposing side. They had their whole entourage. Judge never slammed the gavel, okay, because he was BFFs with the opposing attorney. They had a working relationship in the DA's department for a number of years until he became a judge. So I had no chance. There was no chance. So, then I realized, I got to pay child support. But however, I was under indication of emotional child abuse. So I couldn't work in the hospital. I couldn't work as an ER nurse. Now, how do you pay child support when you're under a false indication? It was false. I was exonerated of both indications, but yet I couldn't work until I was cleared of these. So the child support arrears racked up. And in the end of that, I had gone through multiple support contempt hearings. That's when the judge sentenced me to prison. So I know, right? And so when that happened, she said, if you have $2,000, I'll give you 1 month to get $2,000 to me, or I'm sending you to prison for 2 months. I'm going, well, gee, that could happen. And there was more to that. I could get the 2,000, but the ex refused to pay it. There was a pension fund that he was supposed to, that we had won in Superior Court. He just didn't pay it, right? There's no accountability in these courts. You can't make someone do something they don't want to do. But if you're the target parent, they will make you do it. So, I turned myself in. I lasted essentially 5 days in prison. I had to call my 79-year-old father to pay the purge amount of $2,000 to get me out, because I was having chest pain. I was telling them I'm having chest pain. They wouldn't give me my anti-anxiety medication, one of them, which was Klonopin. And they just don't. It's a human rights violation. It's going on all over the world, not just me. And luckily, I got out, and 5 months later, I had a heart attack. It was a major heart attack with 3 stents to the left anterior descending artery. And they really thought it was broken heart syndrome. And bear in mind, I used to work with the cardiologists and everybody. And it's like, I get to see my friends again. This is kind of fun. But until I found out it was a major heart attack, it just wasn't fun anymore. And it was actually brought on by stress. Because what the artery was doing was it was developing a hole in the artery, and it was slowly growing, and that's what was causing all this chest pain. It was worse than delivering a baby. Okay. I know. And so, now I'm on all this heart medication, and the child support judge, who was very, we believe she had a vendetta. You can believe what you want, but I was seeing a counselor also at the time. I'd seen a counselor for years, and she was also involved in the court system, so she knew the games. But she was saying, I think she has a vendetta out on you. This is not normal. She's coming after every month for a support contempt conference. So I presented her a weeks prior to the support hearing that I had had a heart attack. Here's all the cardiologist's notes. That wasn't good enough for her. She hands me a physician verification form, and she said, you have this signed by your family doctor, and this is what's keeping you out of jail today. And you better have it back to me in 7 days. So my family doctor, thank God, was good. And he filled it out, and I got it back to her the next day. Then she backed off. And now that was in November, because I had my heart attack on October 16th and 17th. I was stented. And then in the meantime, I was also, filling out a reproduced record for the Superior Court to do something with this child support, because this judge is not getting it through her head that I am no longer a nurse. I even had my license taken away because my counselor said, with the medication you're on, I just don't think. And with the stress you've been under and the post-traumatic stress disorder, I don't think you can handle this anymore. So she yanked it. And so, your career's gone, your family's gone, basically. And the one thing the cardiologist said was, it's a good thing you were on that Klonopin. And I said, why? And he said, there's a property in it that it eats away plaque in the heart. And it's like, well, that's good. He said, this heart attack would have been far worse if you were not on that Klonopin. So, I'm on heart medications and, still the anti-anxiety medications and antidepressants. And you're right now, you're just living a life of just what's going to happen next. What can happen next? You're waiting for the shoe to drop. So what I'm doing right now, other than, I wrote the book, and then I launched Slam the Gavel podcast that's available on all platforms. I also filed a federal court suit against the agency and 2 caseworkers, along with the ex-husband who got me into this disastrous mess. What the judge in federal court did was wanting to just close a case and get rid of the ex-husband off the case, to which I said, no, if you get rid of him, the whole case will crumble. So I appealed that to the appellate court. Thankfully, the judges are entertaining that. Then when the judge wanted to close the case, I had to appeal to the Third Circuit. And so far, they're looking at that, and I'm just waiting to hear results back. But I have to hold these people accountable. If I don't do that, they will do this to someone else who can't defend themselves. So that's where we're at.
Wow, no. And what I was gonna say was absolutely that, and I'm glad you're doing that and keeping them accountable in that respect. But it's just incredible that you have to go through those many steps to do so. So it's just, when some individuals are, a little bit apprehensive to then go through that kind of process, we can see why. Just because, like you said, it was so stressful that you literally ended up with, unfortunately, in the hospital as a result. I mean, literally, like it brought you almost to your knees in this kind of respect, just because of how much you were going through and all of that. And so I definitely commend you for even having the willpower to do that. I'm just so disappointed that you have to, so it's just kind of definitely wish it was easier. Definitely, this is one of those reminders that our justice system, unfortunately, is not set up with victims in mind, and those who have actually faced abuse definitely was created by individuals who clearly were on the other side and don't see that. And like you said, you brought up a lot of things that I want to make sure I highlight. So unfortunately, yes, I definitely have, this is definitely not my first time, unfortunately, hearing that when people in the court system, it does benefit you. So that was definitely something interesting that you shared, that unfortunately networking does, it does follow you. So it is, when you're getting a job, it's helpful, right? When you know certain people and you're able to get ins. In the court system, a little different, just because of the fact that when there are different connections, it can unfortunately work against the person who's bringing their case in order to have a fair case. And so, that's why we can see that, it is difficult, right? Because you did all the right steps in your case. It's just that that was something that was counting against you, and it wasn't anything you asked for. You know what I mean? Like you were not at fault for not happening to be in that inner circle. And so that was definitely something. But I agree that I'm glad you have things like these freeform podcasts where you're able to talk about that, because that's not something that's widely shared though, so it's not like this common information that people are aware of. And so they're kind of almost blindsided, like in your case, by that, because they had no idea that that can occur. So I definitely think that was something that I was, definitely astounded by, but unfortunately for me, it wasn't my first time hearing it, but for viewers, unfortunately, I know that that might be something, disappointing, but unfortunate reality that exists within our justice system. However, I'm glad that despite that, as you're, helping viewers see, there are other steps you can take though. You know what I mean? So like, even though there was that, the partiality that was happening there are appeals that can take place. It's just that it might be extra work, but you for one can definitely testify to the fact that you're doing them, because like you said, I'm not going to give up. So like,
Right.
in my case, hey, I'm not, I'm going to find a way. And if it's not here, then I will do it elsewhere, so it might take those extra steps, but you were willing to do that. And I think that's another thing that was incredible about what I heard from your story, because with it, you definitely went through a lot of mistreatment in different areas of your life. But the good thing is you never, adopt. And maybe at one point, you did. Maybe you felt like, wow, well, like you said, you weren't always able to recognize it. So it wasn't always like you felt like you deserved it. It's just that you didn't even know it was happening.
Right.
Exactly, like to even know the signs. So even starting over with your marriage, I mean, 10 years, definitely an incredible amount of time, to be married to anyone, or even to be in a relationship period, with another person. But you obviously learned a lot about that person in the process. And what I think I wanted to connect it back to what you said in the beginning, it wasn't that domestic violence that everybody hears about. So it wasn't that he was necessarily doing things that were physical to you, but you buying something and having to hide that item in your car. You know what I mean? It's things like that. So it's just, those are still forms of manipulation, and it's absolutely abuse. Like, you should be able to do anything for you. Why should you have to hide what you want in front of your partner? It's supposed to be your partner. It's supposed to be somebody you trust, somebody that you can confide anything in, let alone a purchase you made. So it's just incredible that you exactly even had to do that. And so like, and to be in that kind of environment. But like people said, especially when you don't have that kind of radar, like know that, or that level of awareness to look for those things, you might think, well, no, this is just what my partner is. So I have to then develop my own tactics to like, manage that. You know what I mean? Because I want to make sure that things stay happy. So I'm just gonna make sure that I just, I'm gonna go ahead and hide this because I don't want to make them upset. Not knowing that actually, no, you don't have to do those things. Like, it's unfortunate, but when you don't have anybody telling you, especially when you get married, because what really happens is you're supposed to then get with that person, honor that unit that you have, and you're not necessarily supposed to share all your problems with everyone. So like, in order to, really commit, like to that commitment and being like dedicated to it. So it's just, it definitely created like the perfect environment for you not to know what was going on, like you said. And so it was just incredible that, you went through that, but then also got mistreated by the system, like you said, because there are some, I mean, of course, I want to shout out, all social workers that work very hard. We know that they are, they do incredible work. But unfortunately, there are some that definitely show the stress that they're dealing with and don't necessarily deal with it in the best way. I agree that someone yelling at you who's supposed to be assisting is not the way they're supposed to do that. I agree. Like, right. So I just feel like even if you think someone's doing anything, you could ask the question. It does not need to be yelled. You're not so hard of hearing. Even if you were, there are other methods. Yelling does not need to be one. So I'm just so in agreement with you that that was absolutely uncalled for, and like none of that is what you deserve. But it's just incredible that with every step. So already having the marriage having to end, which I'm sure you weren't like happy about. Like, oh yeah, I'm glad that my marriage, like, this is wonderful. Absolutely not. No. Then having that added trauma of having that person move on to someone immediately. I mean, literally, it sounded like there was like no time, pretty much, because you would introduce them, unfortunately, not knowing that they would then develop a new relationship. Yeah. Then having, to go to court and deal with all of that. But of course, which gave you this incredible experience that you're now using to help others, like you said. And then also having to deal with all those other things. So I think that there was a lot there that you shared, which is amazing. But that's what I want to talk about now is that, wow. So I know in the midst of it, you do have the podcast now. You briefly mentioned that, and I definitely want to give you more time to, talk about that. But you also, well, maybe, I'm sorry, you didn't mention it. Your bio mentioned it. And I mentioned in the beginning your poems. Oh, but I'm curious about that. So what was it that was allowing you to keep yourself sustainable in the midst of all this? I'm assuming it was the poetry, maybe other things, but how did you make it through all of that?
Well, I had good doctors. I had a very, very good family doctor. I had a very good psychiatrist. And, you know, even if you mention in court that you have anxiety because you're a registered nurse working in the ER, of course you're going to have anxiety. You've got people coming in, they're dying. And the judge turned that into mental illness, and he played into it with the CPS caseworker. And despite what the CPS judge ruled that I was exonerated, the family court judge did not care. He continued the false narrative that I was emotionally abusing my children, despite a psychological evaluation saying that I wasn't. He didn't care. He just kept going. But what kept me sustained was that Klonopin, that Wellbutrin, the antidepressant, anti-anxiety. I had to have that or I could not function. You know, who wants to walk around their house crying all the time because they took your kids away from you? Then the judge suddenly gave them back to me every other weekend, you know, which was strange because I was still under the second indication of emotional child abuse. And he let me have them every other weekend.
Which is incredible.
Yeah.
And then that's what we want to make sure too, that viewers know, like, you know, that there isn't stigma. And I mean, we know that society, of course, has stigma with getting any assistance or having some kind of like aid. But like you said, it helped you get by. Like, you know, sometimes you might need that extra because, like you said, you didn't want to have to like be, you know, completely broken down in front of your children. And even the little bit of time, which is so unfortunate that you had to even be reduced to that. But during that time, you wanted to be able to enjoy it as much as you could. So like you used that. I'm also curious. And so when did the poetry start? Was that throughout all of this?
Yes.
Or like when did that begin?
It was strange. I would wake up at 2:00 in the morning because, you know, you're still not sleeping good. And I would have phrases pop into my head. So I would get on my phone. I would just keep going with it. And some of the poetry has expletives in it, but it's warranted. I even had a lawyer write to me saying, can I use that and hang that outside my door? Which was called Due Process Fled. That was one of the poems. And yeah, it's a collection of, I can't believe I wrote that many poems, but some of them are amusing. Some of them are, you know, what they are, the truth.
Absolutely. And so then how was it that you were able, did you always want them to like be published at first? Did you were just hoping that they would be for yourself? Like, how was it that you got it to the point where now it's being shared with other, you know, individuals and helping them?
Well, I talked to my publisher because after Dismantling Family Court Corruption was out, and like a year later, I said, hey, what do you think of these poems? And so I sent them to her and she said, yeah, let's put them into a book. This is amazing, you know, all these poems. And I really think everyone will find them amusing, not just attorneys, not just judges, but caseworkers and parents that are going through this will be able to identify and just, you know, there's a couple of laughs out of some of them, you know, it's got to be entertaining. So, you know, it's, I don't know, I can't even remember how many poems I put in there. I think it was maybe 90. I don't remember.
Oh, wow. And that's what I'm forgetting too, as well, is that you already had a publisher. That's right. Because you had wrote a book prior, right? To publishing the book. Exactly. So then, and how did that start too? Like, did you happen to know anybody in the industry that could publish, like when you did, you know, write your first book, or was it just something that you know, that too? I'm also curious, like, what was the journey behind?
Oh, that was bad. That was super bad. Because I had to go through transcripts, make sure everything was in order when I was writing this book in order. And I had 324 pages, and I took it to one publisher and they said, well, you can't use actual names. Okay, so I had to change the names. And then you can't use swear words. So then that turned into going to another publisher. And that publisher said, well, since we don't want to say that you were fired from your job because you didn't have your child abuse clearances, and let's just say you were laid off because there were too many nurses. And I just let them have it. I said, no, that's not the truth. So I contacted a friend who had a book published, and he said, go to Melanie Hanson Davis at Triumph Press, give her your book. So I spoke with her and she said, it's 324 pages. It's great. All of it is all good, but we've got to take all the good parts that are really good and combine it, because parents have to be able to read this and not get through 2 chapters and like, oh, this is too much for me. So it's 160 pages of a handbook of family court and how to get through it.
Wow. And see,
Yeah,
once again, what I love about that is, again, that triumphant spirit that you have and just that resiliency, but also that, no, if I'm going to publish something, I want it to be the right story. Like, so
right.
it's incredible to like hearing that. So if there's anybody out there who also has a story that they care to share, want to, once again, first of all, I hope you feel encouraged to do so, because clearly, there are other individuals that can absolutely benefit from your story. But
Right.
like you're hearing from MaryAnn, it should be the right story. And so
Yeah.
it's incredible
Right.
that,
Because yes, I'm so sorry. The other publisher wanted me to change my name also. And I said, no, how can
right,
I do,
absolutely not.
if I were to do a book signing, how could I do that? And so that's what Melanie had said. And she says, well, granted, we do have to change the names for legal reasons. But other than that, we're going to keep the story as it is with your name on it. And she brought up, how are you going to sign books if it's a different name? So,
Right. Wow. So again, there are so that's what's incredible about your story. Once again, is that there are individuals out there that can assist. Right. Like there's great individuals that can help us. You said it yourself. There are great doctors out there. There are great individuals. All of that. But there
mhm,
can be people that we find along the way that just might not have the best intentions, and who knows why. I mean, maybe for them it would have been beneficial, easier to publish. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I just love that you stay true to your authenticity, and you were like, okay, well, that may be how you operate, but I'm letting you know I'm not going to be able to do that, because if I'm going to do this, it needs to be the
mhm,
right way and reflect me, wholly and completely, and, from a real place. So I'm glad that you did that, sought elsewhere, and that you had a great network. So, I mean, you had your friend that was able to give you that
mhm,
great advice. And even if you didn't find it there, I'm sure you would have found the answer another way, because that's just the person you are. But
mhm,
it's just that it was wonderful that you did that, because again, if you're
right,
going to have that work, it definitely needs to be the real work. So wow, it's amazing to me that some people will be trying to change it, although it's not the first time we've heard about that. And I think there was someone else who were on the show that was talking about like a show that they were trying to do and produce, and someone, when they teamed up with the other person, they tried to change it. And so, like, I don't know if it's just people, the authority that they have, and they just kind of like lose sight of things, or what it is. But I'm just glad that knowing that this is your first published piece of work, that you want to make sure it was right, it was done the right way. So I think that, it's incredible. It's definitely something to be proud of, but it's also something that I hope we all support, absolutely. But I think the other thing that, because I want to give you time before we end to talk about that book also, and then also all the other things that we can find, is that you mentioned a current husband, and we love to know that there is hope on the other side.
oh,
So
yes. Yes.
yeah, so how'd you find him? Like, how did that happen? We're so curious.
Well, I met him, actually, it was strange. I had actually known his sister for 15 years. I never asked her if she had a brother or what, because I thought, everybody was all married and that, but I found him on Match.com actually. And he didn't answer me the first time. I waited a couple months, and then I wrote to him again, and then he wrote back. He was laid off because he's a union steam fitter, not a union electrician, which was in the CPS report. She got that wrong. So, so we hit it off, and then he said, my sister, and it's like I've known her for 15 years. Why didn't she meet? Why didn't I know you sooner? But at least we had gotten married November 12th of 2011, and lucky for him, he traveled a lot, and he'd been doing that since he was 18 as a steam fitter. He would travel to different states, work on nuclear reactors at that time. Um, but during this whole court thing, lucky for him, he was out of town. Lucky for him, the lies were told on me and not on him. So, I mean, that was always my fear for anyone that I was dating or even now married to, that what if one of one of the kids tells a lie on your spouse? And luckily it was on me. So he stood by me through this. He helped finance the book. And he's just and what we did to keep the marriage safe was that he would call me up and he said, okay, what happened in court? We only allowed ourselves to talk about court for 10 minutes. After that, how was your day? My day went like this. And then I took the car to have an oil change. We didn't dwell on court because if you do, that will destroy your marriage and your friendships. But just to let people know, you will have friendships that will end because of family court, because either they don't get it or they're tired of hearing about it. Yet they'll ask you how it's going, but then they don't want to hear about it.
No, and I agree. And then I just think what's interesting about what you're sharing is that so you have this marriage, this marriage, which is great. It's clearly this great source of support. It's been able to be this wonderful, thing in your life. But what's incredible is that so you didn't find him when you were in this perfect place, and so I think that that's another myth sometimes that we think like, whenever we face trauma or anything in our lives that, we need to heal completely. And then that's when we're going to find the person that's going to be like the reward that the universe is going to give us. And it's like, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. I mean, you could, first of all, we should be constantly working on ourselves as individuals, but it is okay to have somebody be a source of support for you, as you're going through it. And that is incredible because I wasn't sure where he came into the picture
yeah.
at.
Yeah, he came in 7 years after the divorce.
Wow.
So like my ex married first, and it's like, I wanted to get married first, but I had to find the right guy because
Absolutely.
I had 3 kids and I had a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old at that. I had to consider a lot. I can't marry the first thing that crawls across my plate like he did. Okay. So, and plus his parents were magnificent. They took my kids on as their grandchildren. And it was just very harmonious. And then, however, that's what also sparked all this family court issues was my remarrying.
Yes, that was the other thing that I wanted to bring across. Just that those are things that people probably don't think about, but that's also like a little bit horrific, but also something that we should definitely talk about is that even that gets exposed. So if you're in the middle of family court, they literally have to like look into your dating just because, and I mean, I kind of get it because I guess they're trying to look at the full picture of who you are, but you would think that some things could be sacred, and unfortunately they're not. In family court, everything goes because they're looking at who you are as an individual and all of that. So I thought that was incredible to hear because of course it makes sense, but you still don't think about those things, that you would, even who you're dating is still
Right.
fair game, and they need to look at that and then talk to them.
Yeah.
So did they also have to speak to him individually and all that, like interview him? Did they just go off of your accounts, or what was that part looking like?
They didn't even interview him. They didn't even really bother with him. They just made up false allegations because we were dating 3 weeks and we got a letter from an attorney who is, I guess, representing my ex. And they were saying, this guy's bad news. He's got 4 babies out of wedlock that he's not paying child support on, and he's gone bankrupt 3 times. And I showed this letter to my future husband, and I was horrified. So I took it to his sister, who actually lived next door, and I said, "What do you think of this letter? Is any of this true?" And she was so mad. I mean, because when you meet someone, you gotta, look at everything. But she said, none of this is true. He doesn't even have any kids. He hardly ever dated because he was traveling all the time. So, there was none of that. It was all a falsehood. So we took it to an attorney and said, can they get away with, this defamation of character? And it was so sad because the attorney said, really, if you were in a burning building, you're on the 1st floor. I'm dealing with people that are on the 7th floor. I would just ignore this letter.
Okay. Which is very good to know because it looked like they were stopping at nothing, and definitely like even if they were just drawing at straws at this point, but like any tactic they could use, they were trying to. It was just incredible that there were so many things that they would even try. You know what I mean? At that point, I'm just glad that yes, it wasn't effective. I'm very glad for that. But it's just incredible that would even be there. And you had also mentioned that it led to parental alienation, and I forgot to mention or ask as well. So when you're saying that, like for viewers who might not know exactly what that is, what exactly is parental alienation and all of that?
It is okay. There's the DSM-5 which is like the psychiatric Bible. I used to be a psychiatric nurse, so we had now I think now there's a DSM-6, but it's written in their V995.51, child psychological abuse, and it goes down and how it divides it up degradation of the parent, instilling fear into the child. And these are written under different codes. It's fascinating. And it's only like 2 pages of it. But, that is also a form of domestic violence and domestic terrorism, that a parent will deliberately take your child because they got custody of them and fill their head with a false narrative that you should be fearful of your mother or father because they'll create some narrative, and therefore then that child doesn't want to come see that parent, and then they'll instill whatever narrative to hate the parent. And that is what parental alienation is. A lot of people don't want to use it. We never used it in court, although his attorney did. Okay, this is a term you don't want to bring up in court. You want to bring up child psychological abuse. You want to note the patterns when and what your child says to you. And it's so insidious, you don't see it coming. So I have two children that won't speak to me. I've got one that will. It's just something that will have to run its course. I may see them again. I may never see them again. But their minds have been so corrupted and brainwashed by these 2 individuals, that they'll never be the same.
Regardless, which is unfortunate. And that's something I was going to ask you as well, because unfortunately that's another, like collateral damage that also
Right.
occurs during these situations. Yep. Is that, are your children, because of course they're also like not at fault, like, like you mentioned, and it's just so unfortunate that they
It
just have
is.
to be in the middle of it. And then, they have both their parents. And it's okay like that you are no longer together just because you couldn't be, you know what I mean? It would have been worse to stay together if
Right.
all these things were happening, right? For you, for them, and you probably wouldn't have been able to show up as a great mother in that case, but only because you would have been so stressed. That's
Right.
what I mean. Like, you would have been able to be present. So I think either way, it would have been very damaging in that respect. But it's just incredible that like our children are so malleable. You know what I mean? Like, so can be so influenced by all the different things that they hear, and so it's just something to keep in mind, because it's absolutely okay to choose yourself and to be able to then leave a day in a healthy situation,
Mhm.
but just to be mindful of what kind of messages you send in front of your children, because they listen to all of it, number one, but
Mhm.
also just because that's how they're forming their opinion, because they're also dealing with this change. They have no idea how else to like cope with it and make sense of it all. And
Mhm.
so those messages are what's incredibly like valuable to them, but unfortunately, as you're mentioning here, it can unfortunately have negative like, impact. And so I'm sure that was not, I mean, for them, unfortunately, your ex, it might have been part of the plan, but it's just unfortunate that their children had to bear that. You know what I mean?
Well, also, I probably should have mentioned earlier that the reason why I also left that marriage was he had anger management issues. He had explosive anger disorder. And I don't have his psychological evaluation because they won't give it to me as a pro se litigant, even though I'm really allowed to have it. But he was throwing cheap, heavy objects. And I don't want my children thinking this is how you handle your anger. This is another reason why I left. And I remember my oldest saying to me as we were coming out of a grocery store, "Mommy, you don't have to get a divorce." And I said, "Well, I, um, don't, I would never ask you to stay with a man that doesn't treat you right. Please don't ask it of me." Those were my exact words. You know, it,
Yeah. And
it was sad. Because the oldest took it really hard. The other ones were, like not as bad.
right.
But as we progressed through court, when the middle one and the middle ones were saying, we just want to go back and forth between the houses like we had been,
Right.
it was fine. They were happy with that. What the
Right.
judge and the opposing attorney did was twist my son's words to fit their narrative.
Mm.
In fact, my attorney came out of there and she sat down beside me and she said, "They're twisting his words, just so you know that." And I saw it in court transcript.
So
So
yeah.
that these judges don't care about kids. These judges are child abusers in black robes.
Mm. Well, and also, yeah, and they're also not in it to even know, like, truly, you know what I mean, what kind of parents you truly are. They
Mhm.
just have their job to do, which is, to make their decisions and, to be able to do that, whichever way they can. And I'm sure they, don't some of them might not enjoy how long some of these proceedings might be. And unfortunately, that is true. I mean, it's definitely been known that judges will also make decisions based on the mood that they have that day. Like it can, and it's an unfortunate reality that again is not talked about, but is part of the process, unfortunately. So I feel like they just want to make it, what it is, diplomatic, just keep it how they can. But unfortunately, it can be very damaging to those, who are involved and who are doing everything they can to like prove themselves and fight through this. And again, who also don't want to be part of this process. You did not want to have to be in family court. You had to be. So it's
Right.
just not like you wanted, for that to even be your situation. But I think, like you said, incredibly sad, yes, that you had to share that, but it also was powerful to share. I mean, I do agree that, for better or for worse, whether your oldest was able to, take that in, and even though it might have been hard to hear, it is true though. Like we do want to make sure that we, at least teach our children that abuse of any kind is not okay, whether it's
Right.
overt, covert, whether it's hidden, whether it's obvious, it doesn't matter. It's just that we shouldn't accept that. And so, I would want that for you. And yes, please don't, what I'm saying, ask me to do it either. I think that it was, yes, definitely like literally both sad, but powerful at the same time. But I think too, that was the only other thing I wanted to share before you talk about everything and how we can find you is that, so yes, as a pro se, I know I say it kind of differently, litigant, but yeah, what is that? And then like, how were you able to navigate the court system as that?
Well, luckily, I, on Facebook, there's a lot of resources, and I learned from the opposing attorney, and I was looking at his motions and I was just using that as a template. So then I was just filling out what, I'm going to want for my motion. And what I was arguing was this astronomical child support they wanted out of me, close to $1,000 a month, basing it on a full-time registered nurse's job, which I was never full-time. I was always per diem, so I could, take the kids to whatever, dentist appointments. Okay. And the judge couldn't get it through her head that I had lost my entire career. She was still estimating me at a full-time registered nurse's income. And that's what I was fighting. And what was also going on was they wanted me to stop fighting. They started manipulating the kids to say, Mom, stop fighting. But I had to fight for my life because I would be going in and out of prison. And they call it jail, but it's really prison. But I can't live like that. And this has to stop. And thank God the Superior Court ruled in my favor. And I told my husband, I said, since my heart attack happened, I hate to do this, but we have to hire an attorney. I found a Supreme Court attorney from another city. She cost just as much as everybody else. So she wasn't highly expensive is what I'm trying to say. But she went in there and she cleaned house, and she said she wanted to wash everything away. That's what she would like to see happen. She didn't know how the judge was going to rule. But the best thing I heard out of her mouth was, Your Honor, you have to abide by what the Superior Court ruled. And it's like, wow. I can't believe she said that to her. Because this judge is a yeller. She'll yell, just burst out yelling. And it was just, what we got back was we still had to pay child support, which should never have happened to begin with. But she took the payment down from like around close to 1,000 down to 100 a month, and only $10 on the arrears. And however, the arrears were at 11,000, which should never have happened. And they yanked my passport, which I finally got back. But it was just a mess. And all of that had to be put into this book so people can see this is what can happen. Not always, but can happen to you. And you can have a judge that just doesn't like your looks. I don't know what the problem was. But after the book was published, I was shocked that 3 weeks later, a Canadian producer emailed me and said, I'd like to make a film based off your book, inspired off your book. He said, it's not really going to be your story, but it's going to be inspired off your book. And I said, yeah, I said, sure, why not? He's Canadian, and it's like, that's great. And he said, well, how does this work? And he sent me a contract, and he said, essentially, you and I get paid last after the film is made. I said, okay, that's fine. I don't care. I just want the word to get out. So he's looking for an A-list director and an A-list actress to, the film is going to be called Custody Denied. And the screenplay, my publisher read some of it, and she said it was very, very good. And so, we're just biding our time. He's partially funded with close to $1 million. And so we're just waiting to find the right people that want to do this.
Wow, which is incredible. And that was a perfect transition because I wanted to ask next how we can find all these amazing things, because you have the book, and now obviously we know an upcoming film, hopefully, and all of these things. So this is, definitely incredible news. But I definitely want to now give space for that. Can you tell us like about the book, where to find it, if there's going to be other things in the future, all of that?
Oh, you can find the book on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Apple, I think Apple iTunes. You could find it. It's on Smashwords. It's on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com, which is my website. People contact me there. And, like I tell them I'm not an attorney, I'm not a counselor, but I can just give you my advice. And I've talked to so many people. And also with the podcast, that's just how I've been coping through all of this. And also I think if I told you that I've taken the course to federal court and now the appellate court, however, that also helped the ex destroy the relationship with my second child. But yeah, it's like, wait a minute, I'm the victim here, and you know that. And he's making it all about him. And this is why we have to study personality disorders.
Right. And be aware of that. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So yeah, because every step that you've taken has definitely been one where actually you're trying to do the opposite, which is, defend your own character, but also to at least preserve the little bit of relationship you have left. So it's actually your step trying to defend yourself. And instead it was used in his case as an attack against you. So it's just every step that you've taken, he just tried to undermine it and then unfortunately use it against you. But I agree that with that being said, I know there might be others that might find themselves in similar situations. One, you should definitely know you're not alone, but that also if this manual, like you said, and, can be used to help and at least let you know, like give you at least some steps, like you said, it's not necessarily like the rule book, but at least give you some guidance and some advice, please use it. So with that, I'm definitely glad that you have that you use all these different, methods of being able to reach individuals with the book, with the podcast, and with all of that. So all I would love for you to be able to do as we wrap is to be able to share with us again, like the name of the book, the name of, I think it was also the collection of poems, name of your podcast, all that jazz before we officially end things together.
Okay. It's Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Apple and Smashwords. And also, if you go to my site, dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com, you can click on the button that will lead you right to Amazon. The second book is Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. And you can find that in the same place. And also Slam the Gavel podcast is available on all platforms, iHeartRadio, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Anchor FM. So we're out there spreading the word and to encourage people not to give up. And the tool is persistence. I kept going back to the Superior Court and kept going back because I had to. And persistence paid off.
Absolutely. And that's what I was going to ask too. Like if there's anything else, a little tidbit that you had wanted to share, but I agree. I can't agree more. Persistence definitely, paid off. And I'm glad. And like you said, I know it can be hard to do it and to maintain it, but use whatever you need, whether it's your network, whether it's whatever, whether it's like you said, like writing it down in your case, with the poetry or whatever you need, keep it going because it's worth the fight. And even if it's a fight, nonetheless, it's definitely worth doing and you're worth, defending. And so despite any, attacks against you, like in your case you are, and for anyone listening who can resonate with this, you are absolutely worth that fight as well. And so with that, MaryAnn, thank you so very much for being with us today. Absolutely. It was such a pleasure. And again, everyone, please go out and get the book. Definitely support the podcast. You heard where to find it. Not hard to find because it's on multiple platforms. But whatever you can, and definitely connect with her if you want to. So thank you all. Thank you, MaryAnn.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.